Welcome back to another Xamarin University guest lecture. I'm Rob Gibbons, and I'm very happy to welcome Brian Lagunas today. Brian is a product manager at Infragistics. He's focusing on the XAML platforms, including WPF, Silverlight, Windows Phone, Windows Store, and our very own Xamarin.Forms. Brian has a lot of experience designing and building XAML-based applications, and the result of that experience can be seen in the Prism library, which is kind of a cross-platform MvvM framework, among other things. Brian will correct me on the actual feature set of Prism. So for the next hour or so, he's going to walk us through using Prism in our Xamarin.Forms applications to create some well-structured and maintainable apps and how Prism is going to help there. Now, as always, if you have questions, please use the GoToWebinar control panel. You can ask questions right there. And Brian's going to stop occasionally during the presentation and answer the ones that he can. If there's any left over at the end of the presentation, we'll answer those as well. So please ask your questions there. We will make sure we get to them. And with that, it's all yours, Brian.
Man, that's one heck of an intro. I should have you at all my webinars. That's pretty good. Yeah, so there's not much left to say about myself. It was explained pretty precisely. One thing I do want to point out is my email, blagunas@infragistics.com. Please email me. I blog about all kinds of technical goodies on brianlagunas.com, and probably the easiest way to get me is on Twitter, @brianlagunas. And today I'm here to talk about Prism for Xamarin.Forms. Now, some of you may or may not have heard of Prism, but it actually has a pretty rich history. So what is Prism? Well, Prism is actually a XAML application framework. It was born back in the WPF days, back around 2008 for the Microsoft Patterns and Practices team. And it was all about building loosely coupled modular composite XAML applications, very enterprise-y level stuff, right? It's based on best practices, so things you should be doing, patterns, which are things that you are using already. And the best way I can explain a pattern is basically it gives a name to something that you do already. That way, when we have a conversation, I know what you're talking about and you know what I'm talking about. So that's how I understand Prism as patterns to be. And then, of course, it's all about being testable and maintainable. So that means getting rid of those static method calls in your view models, right? Making your application easy to use, making it easy to extend, and for someone who just got hired to jump right in and know what's going on and can easily figure out your code base. That's kind of the gist of it, okay? So what do you get with Prism? Why do you care about Prism? Why are you attending this webinar? Well, obviously you get MvvM support, but you know, Prism's always been labeled as a MvvM framework, and it's not. It's much more than that. MvvM is just a small portion of what Prism provides, and you're going to see that in the demo today. You get commanding. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, Brian, I mean, Xamarin.Forms has commanding. Yeah, but we do it better, and I'll show you why. Messaging. Once again, Xamarin.Forms has messaging. Well, once again, Prism does it better. We have a page dialog service, right? We have logging. We have navigation. Now, navigation's awesome. It's a big deal, and actually today, I plan on showing you some guys that I'm working on a local branch I haven't checked in yet that is really pretty sweet with deep linking navigation support, which we'll get to. And then, of course, dependency injection. Now, a lot of people aren't familiar with dependency injection, but Prism relies heavily on it. It's actually one of its core tenets. And if you're not using dependency injection, you should be, because it makes your life a lot easier and your app a lot easier to test, right? So, enough of that. It's demo time. I'm going to show you why you should care about Prism, especially for Xamarin.Forms. So, I went ahead and created a Xamarin.Forms application because you don't need to sit here and watch Visual Studio work. I've already added the NuGet packages for Prism because, once again, NuGet can take a while to install. So I'm just going to point out what is installed. So there's 3 packages installed for Prism. You have Prism.Unity, which is the container that I'm going to be using today. Prism.Forms, which is the form-specific implementation of Prism. And then Prism.Core, which is the PCL, which is the core functionality of Prism that's shared across all platforms, which is WPF and UWP, the Universal Windows Project, okay? So if you were to add the NuGet package, Prism.Unity, you will automatically get Prism.Forms and Prism.Core. Now, Prism.Unity is what ships by default right now. Ninject support is coming soon, but more containers will come, so don't worry if your container's not there yet, it will be eventually. So we've already added the Prism.Unity NuGet package, and it's all installed on all 4 project heads here. So normally when you have a brand new Xamarin.Forms app, this is what you get, okay? Well, the first step in creating a Prism application starts with what's called a Bootstrapper. So we're going to add a new class here, and I'm just going to call it Bootstrapper. And a Bootstrapper is not a new concept. It's not a concept specific to Prism. Actually, you've probably used it plenty of times in your own apps. A Bootstrapper is just simply a class that's responsible for initializing various services that your application is going to be using. Now, since we're using Unity, Prism's going to ship with what's called a Unity Bootstrapper. Okay, and in here you'll see we have 2 contracts: create main page and register types. Well, we won't worry about register types right now, but we will talk about create main page. So I'm going to come into the app and I'm going to delete all that mess. And I'm just going to simply create a new instance of our Bootstrapper. And then we're going to call run and pass in the, whoops, did I misspell something? Hope my, oh, no, that's right. So I've been having problems with IntelliSense in Visual Studio. I don't know if you guys have that problem yet. Let's see if I get a successful build. If we keep having problems, oh, see, that's a problem with webinars. I don't have real-time debuggers. Okay, so new. All right, so we're done in the app.cs, okay? We're done here. So now what we need is a create main page. Well, perfect. That means I'm going to add a new view. Now I'm going to start by adding a new folder. I'm just going to call it views. And then we're going to stick a new Xamarin.Forms page in here. And I'll call it main page. Works for me. So that's good for now. So here I'm going to simply return container.resolve main page. Now this of t is actually an extension method, so I'm going to add Microsoft.practices.unity, and now I could say resolve of t. Now, why didn't I return new main page instance? Well, that's because I'm going to rely on my container to resolve this object, because if my constructor of my main page had any type of dependencies like my cool service, right, something like that, it would automatically create that for me. I wouldn't have to new that up myself. So that's why I'm using the container. Okay, so now that we have this, what's going to happen is when the app launches, the create main page will run and we'll return the main page. So great. Let's go ahead and add some stuff into the main page to kind of make it worth something. So how about a stack layout? And I'm just going to change this to title. That'll work for now. Okay, so the next step to creating a view is normally you have a view model, because we care about MvvM, right? Right, we all do. We're XAML devs, so we use MvvM. So I'm going to create a new folder, call it view models. And we'll create a new class, and we'll call it main page view model. Creative, right? Okay, so we'll make it public. And then it's going to derive from what's called a bindable base class. And all this is just a class that implements the iNotify property change. That's all it is. Doesn't do anything else. Okay, very simple. But now what I can do is I can say, you know what, I'm going to create a new property of type string, and I'm going to call it title. And let's set equal to main page. Now with MvvM, really the hardest choice you have to make is how do you make that connection between the binding context of your view and the instance of the view model. So most people, they might come into the code behind and they'll do something like, hey, the binding context here equals a new, main page view model, right? You could do that. We don't want to do that. Instead, we're going to rely on Prism to make that connection for us. So we're going to start by adding a new namespace, XMLNS, CLR namespace. That's in Prism.MvvM, and then of course the assembly. I really wish I had IntelliSense here. Assembly equals Prism.Forms. All right. So Prism actually ships with what's called a view model locator. Now this is different than the view model locator you're probably thinking in your head. Most people, when they hear view model locator, they think, yeah, I have a class, I call it view model locator, and in that class, I create a property, a static property for every single view model that I have. And if I want to pass parameters around, I got to have static stuff to manage all that. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. We don't want to do that. You know, it goes against all the solid principles. That sucks. Instead, what Prism does is we have a nice little attached property. View model locator dot auto wire view model equals true. Now, what happens here is when we set this to true, Prism uses a convention which you can change, right? This isn't set in stone, but the convention says, hey, this view is located in a namespace or folder, a namespace called views. So if you look at this page here, we have a views namespace. So what it does is it takes the name of that main page or that page and it says, okay, the name of this view is main page. I'm going to go look into a view models namespace for something called main page view model. I'm going to pin view model to the end of it. And when I find that, I'm going to automatically create an instance of it using the container of your choice, so Unity. So that means if your view model has any dependencies in the constructor, it will automatically resolve them. And then I will automatically set the binding context to this view, to that instance for you. Perfect, right? So let's go ahead, and I have my emulator running. Let's see if this will work for me. This is very simple. All we expect to see is a title of main page sticking up there. Yay, main page, it worked. Whew, demo gods are with me, right? Okay, well that's great and all, but you know, everyone can do that, right? Well, yeah, you're right. So let's start getting into the more complex features and what the real benefits of Prism give you. So first thing is, we're going to need to respond to some type of interaction from the user. We do that in every single application we'll ever write. So I'm going to create a button. We'll call it navigate, and we're going to have a command. We're going to bind to a navigate command, right? Standard stuff. So anytime you have a button, you need to respond to something in your view model, you know that you're going to have to create a command. Now in Xamarin.Forms, you have a normal command. Well, we're going to actually use what's called a delegate command. Now a delegate command is just like a Xamarin.Forms command, but we have a couple extra features that I think you'll appreciate. We call that navigate command. Perfect. Now, I'm not going to use the generic version. There is of T, right? So if you wanted a string parameter, you could do that just like you would expect. In our case, I'm not going to worry about that. So let's create an instance of this command. So new delegate command, and this is going to be just like you would expect. Navigate, and then can navigate. So basically, a delegate command allows you to provide methods as a delegate that are invoked in response to the user. So we'll just respond true here, and then we're not doing anything on the navigate just yet. Okay, so pretty straightforward, right? Now, if you're familiar with the navigate command or with delegate commands in general, with commanding, you know that if I need to respond to something in the user interface, this can navigate, this can execute delegate here, can navigate, returns true or false and lets you know if you can invoke the command or not. So, just for fun, let's add a property here. We'll make it a Boolean. Can navigate prop. Works for me. And then we'll just return can navigate prop. right? Because normally you have some type of logic in here that says, can I navigate to this view? So that means I'm going to stick a switch in here, and this put it is toggled bound to that can navigate prop. Hopefully I spelled that right. Okay, so what would normally happen is we would have to respond to some type of change so that, when this navigate property changes, I need to reevaluate the can navigate. So you would do something like navigate command dot raise can execute change, right? So we have to add this mess to our constructor. This is not good. We don't want to do that, right? That's ugly. But let's just see it in action. Let's go ahead. I'm going to hit a breakpoint here. Let's run in the emulator. Here we go. All right, so I have this switch, right? I'm going to turn it on. The navigate invokes, so I can return. We hit our breakpoint. Perfect. Works as expected, but the code is nasty. We don't want to do this. That's horrible. What if our command could automatically just monitor or observe that property for you? Say something like observes property, right? Can navigate prop. So that means we can remove all that nastiness from our setters, which makes things a lot harder to test in the first place. We keep our setters clean, and our delegate command here can observe as many properties as we want automatically. So now let's go ahead. We'll run this again. Now the functionality shouldn't change, right? The functionality is not going to change. It's going to behave the exact same. The only difference is we cleaned up our code. We made our view model a little more testable, a little more easier to read, right? So same functionality, it functions just the same, but it's a little better implementation. Okay, well, here's another scenario. Let's say that, I only have this property that I modify. I really don't need a can execute method in the first place. If I can just use this property, that would just be great. Well, you know what? Let's delete that can execute delegate method, and let's go ahead and change this to say, I'm going to observe the can execute. So now what the observes can execute does is it says, okay, not only am I going to monitor value changes in your property, I'm also going to use that result as the result for the can execute delegate, right? Pretty slick. So let's run this again. Once again, nothing's going to change, functionality-wise. It's going to be the same. The only difference is we're cleaning up our view model code. We're cleaning up our logic a little bit. We're keeping things a little easier to test, a little easier to maintain. Same functionality. It's just a better way of doing it. Okay, great. So what's next on the list? Actually, I'm going to pause for any questions right now because I'm going to move on from delegate commands right now. So I'm going to just glance over here. Okay, no questions. I must be doing a great job explaining it. Or I'm on mute and you just see my screen changing with no sound. Okay, so the next thing we want to solve is navigation. And actually, navigation is a big deal. It's like the core of every application you'll ever write, is how do I get from one screen to another? Well, the problem is, right now, if you were to navigate, let's create another view. We need something to navigate to. So let's go ahead, we'll create a new view. I'm going to call it View A. Okay, so we have View A, and you know what? Just while we're here, I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff just to speed things along. Let's see. You know what? I'll take all that too. Why not? We'll just stick it in our view here, but I won't need the switch. Okay, so we have a new view. We want a view model, so let's just go ahead and do a quick view model here. Remember the convention, it's page name, so View A, view model. And once again, you can change that convention if you don't like it. Okay, so we'll say, and then, you know what, let's just copy all that. We can do that, right? Not in production, though. You'd never do that in production. And we'll add our usings here. We don't need this. Okay, good enough. All right, so we have a view model, we have a view, we have something to navigate to. Now, in current Xamarin.Forms land, you have to go into your code behind or into your page, and you'll say something like navigation.push async or push modal, right? And then you'll have to pass a new page instance. Yeah, that's not good. We don't want to do that. We want things a little nicer than that. So Prism's concept of navigation is completely different than what you're probably used to. Navigation in Prism is more about, it's not about navigating to pages. It's not about navigating to view models. People love to navigate to view models. I don't know why, but they do, okay? Prism is all about navigating to this idea, this concept, this experience, right? The view model doesn't know what you're navigating to per se. So let me explain what I'm talking about. Okay, so the first thing we need in order to even attempt navigation is we need a navigation service. So I'm going to ask Prism for the navigation service. Now, there is a caveat with this particular service. Because navigation in Xamarin.Forms relies on the correct page instance, it must be there. And because of a limitation with DI containers with constructor injection, you have to name this service navigation service. This is case sensitive, has to be spelt just right in order for it to work. And it's only because of that limitation with Unity. So if that, I already submitted an issue on Unity's GitHub repo, so if they fix it, that will go away. But for now, there is a dependency on this has to be named navigation service. So of course, we need to store this off. So I'm going to get the navigation service, and I'm just going to say, okay, yep, navigation service. Perfect. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to say navigation service.navigate. I have two options. Okay, I have a navigate string, and I have some parameters there, use modal, animated, and I have a navigative T. Let's talk about navigate first. So we have this string it's expecting, this name, right? So for now, let's say, you know what, I'm just going to assume it's view A, right? How do I know it's view A? Well, anytime you want to navigate to something in Prism, you have to register with the navigation service. So we're going to go into our Bootstrapper. Remember this register types? I'm going to say, hey, container, I'm going to register a type for navigation. The type I'm registering is view A. Now, by default, the convention says whatever type you give it, that's the ID, that's the unique identifier that's going to be used, right? So view A, that's the name of that class. That means my key is going to be view A. Now, if you have a custom naming convention, maybe you say, you know what, that's just going to be A. That's all I want. I just want it to be A. Well, perfect. Just make sure you're navigating to the right key. That's all you have to do, okay? So we've registered our view A. We gave it a unique key. We're calling navigate. We have our navigation service. Let's go ahead and run the app. And here we go. So the expectation is, you know what? We're going to turn on navigation right here. I'm going to navigate. We're going to hit that breakpoint. Let's go ahead and go on through it. And I'm at, well, actually, I forgot to update. It worked, but in our view model here, remember our copy and paste? That's why you don't copy and paste. Learn from me. Don't do it. View A. Okay, well, it worked. Trust me, it worked. So we navigated to view A. Now, there is another way to do this. If you just love navigating to view models, we do support it, right? So I'm just going to comment that out. If you really want to navigate to a view model, that's just how you have to do it. We have an overload. Register type for navigation, the view, and then the class. And technically, this could be any class. It doesn't have to be a view model, okay? And then here, we'll just comment this out. Navigation service dot navigate to view a view model. Now, just so you know, technically, you're not really navigating to a view model. Under the covers, we're just registering this with a fully qualified class name. So you don't have to type that in. So if you were going to navigate this using this way, you would have to go like, demo.viewModels. I mean, that would be the key. It'd be crazy long. But you don't have to worry about that because we gave you this overload. So now it's going to behave the exact same. It's going to work this time because I went to the view a view model and updated the title, right? Now, I personally don't like navigating to view models, and the reason is you just created a coupling between this view model and the view a view model. See, I'm at view a now, okay? I don't like that coupling. I like things completely decoupled. So I'm gonna go back to using my key-based navigation, and of course you can use constants, right? No big deal. Just make sure we register that. Okay, so that's cool, right? We're navigating loosely coupled, string-based. Okay, so I'm going to pause right now before I move on to parameters for questions. So I'm going to look over here. Can you explain a little more what the Unity container you're using is? Okay, so dependency injection, it's a concept, okay? It's a pattern. Well, actually, inversion of control is the pattern. Dependency injection is how you achieve it. Anyways, there are tons of different DI containers out there. Unity, Structure Map, Ninject, right? That's just to name a few, Spring.net. And all a container does is it's responsible for creating objects for you. So you don't ever go like here, I'm just asking for this interface. You never see me newing it up anywhere, right? I'm never saying new navigation service. I'm never doing that. That's because I'm relying on the container to do it for me. This view model is completely testable. Its dependencies are known in its constructor. So that's where containers come into play, okay? So now let's talk about parameters. Okay, Brian, you're navigating to view A. That's awesome and all, but how do I get information or state from this view model to that target view model, right? How do I do that? Well, luckily, there's a way. So we have what's called navigation parameters, and you can simply add any parameters you want. Oh, there's my new again. There we go. So I'm going to add, I got to give it a key, right? The key is, I'll just call it ID. And then object of value. It can be any value. It can be integers, doubles, doesn't matter. For me, it's just going to be a string, hello from main page view model, right? You can add as many parameters as you want, doesn't matter. And then you simply pass it into your navigate call. Now, that's great and all, but how do I get that in the view model, in the target view model? Well, we have an interface for that called iNavigationAware. Now, iNavigationAware has two methods on it: onNavigatedFrom and onNavigatedTo. As you can expect, onNavigatedFrom is invoked when you're navigating away from the view model, and then onNavigatedTo is when you're navigating to this instance. So, for example, I can say, hey, the title of this is going to be the string. I have to cast it. I know what to expect. In a production code, you would do something a little different. Parameters, index of ID, right? So I'm going to set the title. So let's go ahead and run this. But this allows me to capture those parameters from the source into the target view model. And then I can handle that. So while that's loading, I'm going to come over here and look at questions. Okay, how well does the navigation service work with nested navigation like master details or navigation and tabs? How much control over the navigation stack do you have? Does the navigation play nice with triggering modal pages? Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because I'm about to blow your mind after this example. Okay, so I'm going to navigate, and there we go. We received the parameters from the source, handled them, and I set the title here. Okay, cool. Now, let me just show you one thing, and then we're going to talk about that question about, nested navigation, tabs, like all that crazy stuff, because that's something I wanted to show you that's going to be really cool. Okay, so view model A. So we have a navigate method, just so you know. If I wanted, actually I'm going to copy and paste some more just for time. I need the navigation service again. So I'm just going to ask for it. That's what I do. And we'll come in here and just copy that. Right there. Okay, so I got my navigation service. Whoops, wrong spot. Here. Copy and paste to get you every time. Okay, so we have a navigation service. Now I'm going to say, hey, navigation service.go back. So I'm basically popping this from the stack and going back to the previous page in my navigation stack, okay? Now, this is still kind of up in the air. I don't know if I want to be able to pass parameters back or not. So this is still kind of, I'm just trying to think about this. So if you guys have any feedback on how that should work, I'm totally open to it. We can add it, no problem. Okay, so I'm not going to run this and show you how it works because obviously you know how it's going to work. What I do want to show you is actually I'm just going to run it because this is really cool. Okay, so I'm going to launch another solution. I am working on the next major feature for Prism for Xamarin.Forms. Okay, and this is a first look. No one else has seen this. Let's say you have a URI. Relative or absolute, doesn't matter. For example, check out this. I have non-HTTP, right? So think deep linking, because that's exactly what you're talking about with navigation is, hey, I have master details, and then I need to select the detail page of a master detail, or have a tab, and all that crazy stuff, right? Well, imagine something like this, where you have your protocol, you have the name of the app, and then you start deep linking into your application. So you're saying, okay, I want to load master detail. The detail of that page is view A, which this happens to be a navigation page. And of that navigation page, I want to navigate to view B. Then I'm going to use modal and navigate out to my tabbed page, passing these parameters just to that page because I'm going to select orangutan in it. Then I'm going to pop modal to view C. Then I'm going to pop modal to view A, which is a navigation page, which is push. I'm going to push modal, then push async to view B because it's a child of view A, and then push modal to view C. Okay, that's freaking complicated, right? That's craziness. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to run this in the emulator. I'm actually pretty excited about this feature because this is going to open up all kinds of powerful navigation scenarios, even opening links from web pages into your Xamarin.Forms app that will allow you to deep link into that. Okay, so here's my little test app I had. So I'm going to hit navigate, and then it's going to go through its crazy stuff, right? I ended up at view C. So I should come back to view B, which is inside of a navigation page, view A, which I'm a pop modal, or pop really, back to view C. Now view C is going to pop to my tabbed page, which I used the parameters selected item orangutan for this data bound list, right? So there's orangutan, which is selected based on my parameters. Back to view B, which is inside view A, which is a navigation page, which is inside a master detail, right? And then back to my main view. How sick is that? That's crazy right there, right? I'm super excited about that. I'm still working on test coverage, and I'm still documenting, but I'll be checking this into the repo very soon, and I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Got to move on. Only got a half hour left and tons of stuff to show you. So I'm going to look for questions right now before I move on to messaging. And I don't see any new ones. So I guess I'm just doing an awesome job of explaining, like, or your mind's just completely blown, you're speechless, right? Because I don't see any questions popping up. Okay, so next, messaging. How do I communicate between these loosely coupled components that don't know anything about each other? Right? Now, especially in that scenario where I had that deep link with all that navigation stack, let's say I was on view C and I wanted to send a message all the way back to the root page. How would I do that? Well, you're probably thinking, well, you know, Brian, what you would normally do is you would use the messaging center from Xamarin.Forms. No, that's not what I normally do because there's a problem with that. Messaging center is a static method call, right? I don't want to call static classes in my view models because now my testability just went to crap, right? We don't want to do that. Instead, we're going to use what's called the event aggregator. So I'm going to go I event aggregator, let's call it EA for short. I'm just going to store this off because I'm going to need an instance of it. So we're going to store it. And of course, if you had ReSharper to make all this so much easier for you. Okay, so I have my event aggregator. Now, before I can really do anything with the event aggregator, I need an event. So I'm going to come add a new folder. I'm just going to call it events. This is just what I do. And I'm going to add a class. I'll call it the go back event. Now, the only thing you need to do is make sure it's a pub sub event of T, which T is your payload. You know, what type of message are you sending? In my case, I'm going to send a string, but you can send like a person model object if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. So I have the event. So now what I'm going to say is, all right, when I navigate, I'm going to send a message. So we're going to say EA get event of T. The T is the go back event. And then I'm going to publish this event and pass the payload, which is, I don't know, hello from view a view model. Works for me. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and copy this because I'm going to need that. So let's go back to our subscriber. So we have a publisher and a subscriber. We're going to go ahead and ask for the event aggregator here. Of course, we need to store that just like before. Add our names or using statement here and grab it. Okay, so now I need a subscriber. We have a publisher, which is the view AV model, okay, and then we need a subscriber. So I'm going to say, hey, EA.getEvent of T, which is the go back event. I want to subscribe, and whenever I hear this method or I respond to this, I want to invoke this method, went back. And then the payload, I'm just going to set title equals, we'll just set its object. We're just going to take that message and set the title so we know it worked. Now, something I want to mention on this is you can also tell the event aggregator, you know, because it uses weak references by default. If you don't want it, you could say, hey, you know, keep the subscriber reference alive. You can choose what thread to listen for this message on, right, if you're doing a lot of different threading. And you can also say, you know what, I want to filter this event because I only care about it if this condition is true, right? So you can filter events and all that great stuff. So now let's run this application. Wait for that to start up. And yep, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to navigate. We navigated to our main page. I'm going to hit navigate back. And here it is, hello from view a view model. So the message was sent from the publisher, which is view a view model, and the main page subscribed to that message and received it. The beauty about this is we now have an interface dependency in our view model, which means we are testable, right? That's the core thing. We're maintainable, we're testable. It's beautiful, no more static method calls. Okay, so I'm gonna pause now for other questions here. Okay, so I'm gonna look over here. How do you return values and go back? See, that's what I was just asking. So Prism is actually an open source project. I'll explain this a little more. And so I'm still trying to decide how these things happen, what patterns should we follow. So initially I was passing parameters and go back, but I wasn't sure if that was needed or not. So maybe it is needed. I actually have the code in there. I just commented it out. So that might be something we add as an issue and get resolved on GitHub. Okay, is there going to be a generic way to support cross-plat? Now, I'm not sure what that means, so, Dan. If you could go ahead and...
Brian, he asked that a little while ago, and I think he was referring to, I think, the navigation service. So, Dan, yeah, if you can ask again or get some more detail about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, so to add, you would also not want to use Xamarin.Forms messaging service if you want to share your VMs at all with UWP app. Oh, that's true. So decoupling Xamarin.Forms is nice. Can you comment on the amount of overhead incurred by using Prism? That's something I've always wondered. Okay, so overhead, the size you're adding to your project is only 69 kilobytes. That's how big Prism is. As far as overhead, you're not really adding any overhead. The only part you're really adding is a slight overhead on using dependency injection. And that's because you're relying on a container to dynamically resolve these types. And some containers perform better than others, right? So Unity, personally, isn't really the best performing one, but there are better performing containers out there, and we're going to get support for those. And you can actually create your own container support. It's really easy. Prism is all about extensibility. Everything I've shown you is extensible by you, right? So you can write your own navigation service if you wanted and switch out the implementation. You don't even need to touch our source code. Okay, so well, that's pretty cool. So we're done with messaging. Now, how many? Okay, I got 20 minutes. Awesome. Okay, another cool thing I want to talk about is.
Hey, Brian.
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
Dan added some detail there. If you want to get back to that question.
Let's see. I'm looking.
So he was talking about in your navigation service, you actually use the protocol Android app. So he's wondering, is there going to be a cross-platform way to do that? So you're not, since you're using it in your view model, but you're referencing Android.
Oh, yeah. So
case.
That was just a test URI. Technically, it doesn't matter. Your URI can look like, I'm just going to go var st. It could be as simple as this, right? It could be as simple as that. Or what the navigation service does, it's going to strip out the protocol and the application and the root. So if you had HTTP, right, BrianLagunas.com, whack, blah, 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 it's going to strip out all the crap it doesn't care about, because all it needs to know is what views it needs to start adding to the stack.
All right, so you get to define that then.
You define it. You can use custom protocols. It doesn't matter. And actually, so when you add support for deep linking in your platform-specific code, you would actually go into your main activity. You would handle that from, you would have to get that URI from its source here, and you would pass it back through either the event aggregator or to the app constructor if you wanted to do it that way. So it doesn't matter what the protocol is. It strips out all the crap it doesn't care about and will concentrate on what it does know about. And just so you know, if you have this long URI and you don't register one of those views with the register types with the container, it will skip that in the stack. It will move on to the next and pretend like it never saw it. Okay, it doesn't stop the navigation altogether, just a technical implementation detail. Okay, see if there's any new questions there. Okay, yep, that was it. All right, so now let's talk about another popular methods that you would call off page: display alert and display action sheet, right? Well, those are very page specific, okay? We're not in pages. We don't know about pages. We don't care about pages. So what Prism does is it provides what's called an iPage dialog service. So just ask for this service. We'll call it, sure, we'll just call it what it is, right? I'm going to go ahead and save this off. And we'll grab it. Page dialog service equals page dialog service. Okay. So once again, I'm not newing this up. Because I'm using Prism, it automatically knows, hey, this page dialog service, I know what that is, and I'm going to give it to you because you're asking for it in your constructor, right? So we're still testable. We can mock all this stuff up and run unit tests. No static calls. And then let's go ahead and just get rid of this navigate stuff because we're done talking about that. So the page dialog service is actually pretty sweet. Let's turn this into a async. And then we're going to go page dialog service dot display alert, right? And then you have your title, my alert, right? All this is just the normal stuff. My message, then you'd have an accept, and then you'd have a cancel, right? Var results equals await that. And then you would do something with this string. You know, you get the result would be a string, so let's just run this. While it's running, I'll talk. So you call display alert, it's going to show the dialog, and when you get that result, you do something with it. You check and you compare the strings. Hey, is this accept? Yes? Okay, great. I'm going to run this code. Okay, so boom, there we go. Accept, we would take that. Cancel, right? Well, the same thing goes for display sheet. So I'm just going to delete that right quick. Let's go display action sheet. Once again, my action sheet. And then we have cancel. We have a destroy. And we have other buttons, right? So it's the exact same API, what you're used to. You don't have to learn anything new. But what it does is we're testable, we're maintainable. You know, we're decoupled from pages, but we get the same native behavior that you would expect from building Xamarin.Forms and code behind, except you just pull that away from the page. We don't care about that, right? So here's my action sheet. Here's my other, right? Destroy, cancel. Well, that's cool and all, right? But there's still a problem with this, something I don't like personally. Personally, I can't stand that I have to take the string, check what it is, have these crazy if statements. Oh, if it's accept, if it's destroy, if it's other, right? I don't like that. That blows. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just invoke a command automatically, right? Well, I'm going to just paste in some stuff just for time's sake. You don't sit there and watch me type all day. So we have this concept in Prism called an iActionSheet button. Let me add the debug here. Now what this does is there's an overload on the display action sheet which takes an array of iActionSheet button. So I have this action sheet button, create button, I give it a name, and look, I give it a command. Now in a production app, you probably wouldn't define them here. You'd probably define them up in your constructor or whatever, right? This is just demo code, so don't follow it to the T. But basically, you give it a command. And what will happen is if you click that button, it will automatically invoke that command for you. You don't have to parse any strings and do all these weird if statements. Just worry about your logic. That's all you need to concentrate on, right? And it doesn't matter what order you put them in either. So I can say option 1 action, option 2 action. You know, I can throw the destroy in here if I wanted to. So destroy here. We could put the cancel action here. All right, doesn't matter what order we put it in. Okay. Yeah, okay. Did I misspell something? Cancel action, destroy action. Oh, that's what it is. It doesn't return anything. Whoop. My bad. Okay. So now, this doesn't have a result because you don't need to parse a result. Now we could pass in these options. Let's run the emulator again. And actually, let me open up the output because this is going to be where our message shows up. Ugh. Don't do that to me. Output. Let's clear that out. Okay, now let's run it. Here's our options. So option 1. Here we go. Option 1. Okay. Let's go back to the emulator. Let's say we're destroying. Whoop, we destroyed. So it's writing out to the debug because these commands are automatically being invoked when you click the button. So it's just business logic from here on out. So what do you guys think about that? I like that personally. Anytime I can get away from parsing strings is better. Okay, so I'm going to pause right now, and I'm going to look for questions before I move on. Okay, so does your Prism navigation framework support transactions? Basically, we can let your users make a bunch of changes to fields across a series of navigated screens and allow them to cancel, roll back the changes with a single cancel button. I'm not sure I understand that one completely. So actually, we should take that one offline. You can email me. I'll show my contact information again. I'm curious about that scenario. I'm not sure if I understand it completely. Okay, so here's page dialog service. Okay, so what else do you got? Well, there's one other thing about Xamarin.Forms that really bugs me that I just had to fix. So I'm going to go ahead. I already have a sample that shows this. Okay, dependency service, right? We all know Xamarin.Forms dependency service. So what's the dependency service do for us? Well, what it does is it allows us to access platform-specific functionality within our Xamarin.Forms application, right? Within the Forms app itself. So in your Xamarin.Forms PCL, you go and you add an interface which has some contracts in it, okay? Then you add platform-specific implementations to each of your projects. Like this is the Android implementation for text-to-speech, right? If I go down to iOS, iOS has its own implementation, right? But the key here is that it's all being registered with the dependency service of Xamarin.Forms. So if we go back to our PCL app and we want to use this, we got to say, hey, dependency service.get iText-to-speech. You know what? You know how I hate static calls, and I really hate this, right? I don't want to do this. What would be better is if I can just say, hey, I want iText-to-speech. That's all I want. I don't care about dependency services, right? I don't even need to know about that. I'm just going to ask for iText-to-speech, okay? So now I can say, hey, the text-to-speech services equals text-to-speech. And I can come down here, text-to-speech service dot speak, and then the text-to-speak or text-to-say. Okay, I know I'm on a webinar, but I can hear all you guys clapping right now. I mean, it's so loud. The amount of applause I'm getting is just crazy, okay?
Woo!
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, this is awesome. I love this because I'm still testable. I don't have to have knowledge of dependency service. I just asked my view model, I said, hey, view model, you need this dependency, so you know what? Prism's going to give it to you. Okay, so for those of you who are curious how this is really working, I'll give you a little technical background on how this functions. Okay, so what's going on behind the scenes is Prism basically will try to resolve this by itself, but it's not registered. So iText-to-speech is not registered with the container, with Unity, so it doesn't know about it. So its fallback is to internally call the dependency service for you. It says, okay, I couldn't find it myself because it's not registered with me. So I'm going to check Xamarin.Forms and see if you registered it with that dependency service. If you did, I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that instance instead. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. That's the magic behind it. It's actually quite simple, but it keeps your code so much cleaner, so much better. Okay, so I'm going to pause again for questions about the dependency service integration. Lots of thank yous and laughing out louds.
So, Brian, I have a question.
Yeah.
Does Unity allow you to do any kind of conventions? So, say auto-register anything that ends with the word service or something like that, or anything that is in this particular namespace. So you don't have to manually register each one, but it could just find them through reflection.
Okay, so it's been a while since I've had to do that. I think, don't quote me, I'm not a Unity expert. I know other containers do, like StructureMap definitely does, because I use StructureMap in the past. StructureMap does. I remember in the past I had to do that manually with Unity, but Unity's released some updates since then, so I'm not sure if they've added that or not.
Okay, and in a mobile app, you'd probably want to register them manually anyway, just so you don't have the overhead of reflection and looping through everything, but it'd be good to know. So, all right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and that's another thing. Performance, you know, Prism takes all that into consideration. Behind the scenes, it's caching things, so it doesn't have to, you know, dynamically reload things or check things over and over and over. We're doing a lot of caching. Performance is definitely something that's always on the back of the head when we write a feature. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and follow up with how does Prism compare to what you use now in Xamarin.Forms versus what you can get. So Xamarin.Forms has command. Prism has a better delegate command. And I didn't even get into composite commands, which is like a save all, right? So if you had a tabbed page, each of those pages can have a delegate command that registers themselves with a like parent composite command. So when you invoke the composite command, it will invoke all the registered delegate commands, right? So I'll just switch back here. So basically, composite command, that's what it is right there. So, and then you would register your commands with that. I'll have a sample for that, so you don't have to worry about. I don't have time to cover that, but that's another really cool feature. Another cool feature about that is being iActive aware. I mean, there's just so much of Prism, I just can't talk about it all in an hour. Messaging Center is replaced by Event Aggregator, right? We even got better support for threading and filtering events. The page-based iNavigation, well, now you have an iNavigation service. You have Dependency Service, another static method call, no thank you. I'll take a DI container any day, and it could be any container. I showed Unity, but I mean, like for example, WPF, we've already added support for like 5 or 6 other containers. Those are going to be coming to Xamarin.Forms soon. Display alert, display action sheet, page dialog service, right? So those are kind of the high-level things that you'll use all the time. So where do you get Prism? Well, I kind of showed you already briefly, but it's on NuGet. Right now, there are 3 packages. There's Prism.core, which is the core PCL. This has the logging in it. This has event aggregation, commands. It has the core functionality for view model locator, right? It has a bindable base in it. Then we have Prism.Forms, which is the Xamarin.Forms specific implementation of like navigation, right? That's very unique to Xamarin.Forms. And then Prism.Unity is just a very lightweight wrapper around the Unity container, which allows Prism to resolve these dependencies automatically, so you don't even have to worry about them. Prism is open source, and I really encourage you guys to let me know what you like, what you don't like, where we need to improve, submit PRs, right? Whatever you can do. It's github.com/Prism library. We're still working on docs. We're working on samples. You know, there's just so much work to do. But please get involved, join the community, and help me make Prism for Xamarin.Forms just that much better. Okay. So that's all I have for you guys, and I'm right on time. I have like 3 minutes for additional questions. But I want to thank everyone for showing up. Please give Prism a try. Let me know what you think. It's all about making you more efficient and productive at work, so you can worry less about the little stuff and just concentrate on writing logic. That's kind of the goal of it.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Brian. Again, if anybody has questions, put them in the question in GoToWebinar. This is your last chance. But this is fantastic. So I haven't looked at any of the kind of the patterns and practices type stuff that have come out in quite a few years. And seeing this here, I'm really excited about this. I want to go play around with Prism. There's lots of great stuff in there, and I agree with you about testability, maintainability, static methods, and dependency injection, things like that. So I'm definitely going to go take a look at this. Fantastic presentation. For everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So sorry. I just wanted to mention right quick. You know, I showed this feature I'm working on right now. Each individual page, because I kind of got a question about it earlier. I don't know if I addressed it well enough. Each page can have its own parameter list. So as you navigate to each page, it gets its own parameters through the deep linking. So I hope I addressed that question in there, but very complex navigation support.
So obviously you probably don't know, but any rough timeline on when you think you're going to release that?
Well, right now I'm working on my unit tests, which are always important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to get that checked in probably within the next couple days into source. And then once I get some more eyes on it and some more testing, you know, the beauty about it being open source is I can push to NuGet anytime I'm ready. So it'll be pretty quick.
Great. So a couple more questions that came in. What are some use cases where you found event aggregation helpful in mobile apps?
Well, most of the time where I find event aggregation really helpful, mainly in Xamarin.Forms, is let's say that I'm doing something specific on a platform like Android, and I need to send a message to a class that exists in the PCL, right? So I can actually I'm doing that in this sample. Here I was using the event aggregator to send an event for the deep link navigation. And then this right here handled that URI and performed the navigation, right? So I can pass messages between platforms from Android or iOS up to the PCL. And there's other.
So would you
go
say
ahead.
the same basic use case that you would use Dependency Service in Xamarin.Forms, right? Or any other kind of messaging, message bus or messaging center type thing?
Yeah, exactly. Because dependency service is really about invoking platform-specific code. This is about sending messages across barriers.
Yeah. So so messaging center, same basic idea. Great.
Yep. Yeah.
Another question: any plans to port Prism for native Xamarin.iOS and Android, kind of like MvvM cross?
Right now, the only thing that would really work is the core PCL, which has event aggregator in it and things like that. I'm not sure it makes sense to port something like Prism over to native iOS and Android. I haven't looked at it yet. It's just me and two other guys that are running Prism, so we have a lot on our plate. We just haven't got there yet. I would be interested in the use cases or where Prism can solve issues with the native platforms. In XAML, it's pretty easy to see the limitations with view models and all that stuff, but since you really don't have that on Android or iOS, I'd be curious to see where Prism could help developers create that blueprint for developing apps.
Right. So for MvvM cross, they had to write their own data binding system for iOS and for Android because it doesn't exist like it does on Windows Phone, the Windows Xamarin
Right.
platform. So you would have to do something similar, which would be probably quite a bit of work.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing about Prism isn't about reinventing the wheel, right? It's about establishing patterns and guidance using the current infrastructure. Everything I've showed you is not reinventing some new framework. It's basically leveraging what exists in Xamarin.Forms better, right? We're decoupling what's there already. We're not creating new binding frameworks and all this crazy stuff. It's really about just providing a strong framework, a good guidance on, hey, look, I'm using this technology. What's the best way to get started to write apps that are maintainable, easy to test, and I can just concentrate on logic instead of having static application management classes to hold parameters while I navigate from one page to another and all this crazy static stuff.
All right. So in the questions, you can see there we have quite a few kudos, well deserved. Very interesting stuff. I agree with John there. Really great. And so for everyone else, remember that these guest lectures, they are recorded. They're going to be exclusive just to Xamarin University students. And we'll try to get those up in a few days. Take some processing time to get those up, but we'll get those up and post them on our site. Also, Brian, do you have any materials that you want to share along with that? Because we can host that as well.
Well, I mean, I could, the samples actually, so what I'm going to do, so github.com/Prism library. You can come into the forms, prism.sample.forms. You'll see using the dependency service, using the page dialog service. We have a couple samples in there. And if you want to see documentation, go to the Prism, go to documentation, Xamarin.Forms, and for example, navigating, right? So we're working on docs, but we have quite a bit of documentation in there to help getting started.
Fantastic. All right, so we'll see if we can get a link up there, but if not, just github.com where all code lives nowadays.